Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to New Worlds November. This is a brand new BookTube event all about science fiction that I'm involved with a bunch of other great hosts. It's a new this year. We're just starting it out, and we've had a bit of a rocky weekend for New Worlds November. I'm hoping things get better this week. And it's a vast subject, of course. Science fiction is. This is not only a New Worlds November video. This is also the latest installment of Steve Flees from the Sun. I have a room that is 10 feet by 10 feet. There's only so many places I can go to avoid to flee from the sun. I'm going to hope that I get through this video without disappearing into a nimbus of light. But, it's a vast field, science fiction, so we've decided to narrow things down. First of all, New Worlds November 2021 is dealing with short stories. So no novels in sequence, no massive doorstops, no nothing like that, just short stories. And to help narrow things down even more, we've come up with prompts. Scott and Becky from the Bookish Bryants came up with prompts. It's their event, and we're all joining in, and that's wonderful. I hope it has a long life to it. You never know with BookTube events. And the first prompt was aliens, of course, as you would expect, and the second prompt was AI and robotics, and the third prompt, the prompt for this week, is time travel, and that's an interesting seesaw right there, because the first prompt was aliens, and I had to point out, wet blanket that I am, that we, as far as human science knows, we are the only living organisms. The Earth is the only living biome anywhere in the universe. We don't have so much as a microbe, not even so much as a fossilized microbe, from anywhere else. As far as we can determine, life exists on Earth and exists nowhere else. Now that is probably not true. Certainly the odds are against that being true, considering how many Earth-like planets that theorize to exist. And even those theories aren't just theories anymore. We now know, thanks to the exploding study in exoplanets, we now know how many we can expect to find. It does seem to be defying the odds. It seems a little bit unrealistic to think that life would not have developed on any of those places. My own guess, I won't live long enough to see it, but my own guess would be that no matter how much life is found on those exoplanets, it will all be microscopic, single-celled, bacterial or microbial or some sort. There certainly won't be any intelligent life that makes cameras that can make something like BookTube and that can create books. There won't be anything like that. My impression, the more I think about it, is that such life is virtually impossible, and what we're looking at on Earth is the mother of all lottery tickets, and we just haven't known it. Science fiction has always theorized that that is not true. But anyway, the wet blanket announcement that I had to make for the first week of New Worlds November was that aliens don't exist as far as we know. So all the science fiction that we're reading about them is just fiction. And then for the second week in New Worlds November, I had to talk about another wet blanket subject, which was robots and AI. I had to say not only do they exist, but they're absolutely ubiquitous. And they think on their own. They learn on their own. The only thing they haven't done so far that we know of is make more of their own kind. But they do everything else in ways that the more you learn about it, the more unsettling it is. These AI programs don't just learn their own subject. They don't just teach their own subject to another AI program. They also start learning, in different connections where they're not programmed to do. Many is the AI specialist who will say off camera, off the record, we have no idea how this particular program learned that particular thing. We have no idea. Well, they're the ones who invented it, and they're the ones who crafted the dimensions of the algorithm. If they don't know, then no one will know. I had to mention that AI is all around us. That might account for how ubiquitous AI stories are in modern science fiction, because everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has an experience of arguing with a computer. It might not be literal in most people's cases. I argue with my MacBook Air quite a bit. My MacBook Air is not a smart machine in that sense. It does not know that I'm there. It is not aware of any arguments on my part. I argue with it anyway. But it's easy to argue with smart technology that is aware that knows you're someone else, not itself. If that makes any sense at all. And that was fun to do. That was a great deal of fun to do. And along those lines, before we leave behind robots and AI, I wanted to mention a story. I've alluded to it a couple of times. I had to go looking for it. It's not from 2021. It's from 2020 in an issue of Asimov's. My theme, my own approach to New Worlds November is to read these prompts through the 3 square-bound pulp periodicals that science fiction short stories appear in regularly in the United States. The Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction Analogs and Asimov's. I've been going through those for these themes. And this one, I was doing it just for this year. This particular story is so good. I could not mention it to you, especially since it involves robots and AI. It's from this issue of Asimov's. Sorry about, for you purists out there, about how battered these issues are. I'm hard on my stuff. And, you know, these periodicals, for a long time there, they were going in and out of bags. They were following me everywhere. The story is by Timons Essayas. Not Tim and not Timothy. Timons, Timons. And then Esaias, who's a Pittsburgh author, who teaches at Seton Hill University in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. He's a Pittsburgh author. I wouldn't give it a talk to this author. I'd never read a short story by this author before, and I read this one and loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's called Go, Now, Fix. And it is about the TD8 Panda Pillow, serial number 723756. The Panda Pillow is a kind of little comfort pillow. They're kind of, in this slightly futuristic story, it's the kind of cheap tech that you would pick up at the airport as a last-minute gift on your way to the plane. And this Panda Pillow, the owner has not got around to registering it yet. The Panda Pillow has very simple instructions. The simple, let me see here. Let me see if I can find it here. Comfort, defend. Those are the Panda Pillow's very simple instructions. A very simple AI, but it is an AI. It isn't just a dumb machine. It is an AI. Comfort and defend is its sort of overarching instruction. It's the ethos of its existence. But the owner hasn't got around to registering it individually. So it still has those urges, but it doesn't have anyone to direct them to. And it's just as well, because it's in luggage on a flight when there's a massive problem with that flight, and the humans are incapacitated, and the Panda Pillow is suddenly thrust into the spotlight. It isn't bonded to any one person, so it's what was it again? Comfort, defend mode is true for everybody, and that makes it the hero of the story. This little device that's constantly scrabbling, constantly thirsty for power. Not in the Mussolini way, but just its charging level, the battery level, made me, that element of the story is not main in any way, but that element of the story was really clever and really made me think that if we could read the thoughts of these devices that we have all around us, surely that would be the number one thought. They would constantly be thinking, well, I'm only at 30%. When are you going to fill me up again? I don't have much power left to do any of the things that are my directive to do. Surely that is what so many of them would think. How refreshing it must be for them to be at 100%. I try to keep all my devices topped up, but it's not easy to do. And in the course of this disaster, Panda Pillow, to fulfill its duties, starts making alliances and urging other pieces of smart technology in the aircraft to help it. And it becomes this amazing patchwork. What can this piece of machinery do? What is it designed to do? What are its capabilities? Is there any way, for instance, that Panda Pillow or any of Panda Pillow's new allies can maybe talk to the craft's own emergency AI, maybe get them to kick in and maybe think outside the box and help a little? And it's amazing, just totally heartwarming. And at the end, the decision is made to honor this particular Panda Pillow by not registering it, by just leaving it exactly the way it is and putting it in a museum case. Twice each month, the director shows up in a limousine, the director of the whole museum, not just the caretaker, not the curator, shows up in a limousine after closing hours and whisks Panda Pillow away to the children's hospital, specifically to the critical wards, where its comfort protocol is exercised and where defending is almost impossible. Part of its legend is that this particular TD8 has never been updated. This is true. It is repaired at the Teddy Bear Hospital, however, if it gets worn down or damaged. It has also never been registered, never been bonded to a single person, so it comforts all those it can as needed. After the hospital visit, the director returns to the museum, opens the octagon case, and each time, right before he powers the pillow down for the night, he takes advantage of his privileges as the museum's director. He gives Panda Pillow a hug and a pat on the head. He says, "You defend it. You comfort it." Then he puts it back in the case, closes the door, and goes home. Just incredible. Just amazing. Made me want more than anything else to somehow somehow email this story to the director of content production at Pixar. Just do that. Where this is where we need a Panda Pillow movie where there are no humans anywhere in it except in states of unconsciousness or extreme distress, and it's all these devices on board who weren't made to help, who are just doing what they can and constantly siphoning or scrounging any kind of electric charge lest they run out of power. An incredible story about AI, and not the direction that AI stories usually take, because these aren't world-dominating AI. These are ordinary bits and pieces, a music system or a comfort pillow or whatever. They aren't designed to do what they're doing. They're just rising to the occasion. So that was the finale of Robots and AI. And then we move on to time travel, which is the prompt for this new week of New Worlds November. And with time travel, I'm afraid the pendulum swings all the way back to alien life, because time travel stories have never really done much for me, but it's become increasingly obvious to me anyway, with a very layman's knowledge of quantum physics. It's become increasingly obvious to me that time is a wave function. That time is a facet of a wave function, and not a place, and not a set of things. That rather it is a function of a wave property. If that makes any sense, which means that it's that going back in time would be like going back in a splash. It doesn't mean anything. I increasingly think that it can't happen. That not to be all subcommander to Paul on you, but the Vulcan Science Academy has determined that time travel is impossible. I'm increasingly thinking that the more we learn about quantum physics, the less likely any kind of standard idea of time travel gets. And I think that is reflected in the zeitgeist of science fiction short story authors who are pitching their wares, because you almost never see straight up get in a machine and travel back in time stories anymore. You almost never do that. It's become too obvious. It's become too natural to see that wherever you go, it won't be your own past. That you couldn't do that because you are part of that wave function. You might be able maybe to go to some other wave function, but you couldn't go to that one because you're part of it. You could no more do that than, I don't even know an analogy. You couldn't do it because you would be taking it with you, so to speak. You couldn't get out of your own part of the wave function and go to another part of that wave function. That doesn't make any sense. Even theoretically, I don't think that makes any sense. And I think a lot of science fiction authors know that. So the story I want to recommend for today, it's incredible. It's also by an author that I never heard of before. It's the cover story of this issue of Asimov's from the May-June issue this year, The Metric, by David Moles. As far as I know, I've never read a David Moles story before. This is incredible. It's just an incredible story. It's a whole universe on its own. It's the kind of thing that I always recommend in these periodicals. I always say there's going to be at least one story in the issue that is so great that it brings you to a whole other world, that it feels like an entire novel's reading experience and thrills you, sets your hairs on end. And The Metric definitely does. And it comes close to time travel because the emissary that arrives to the city of Septendrion in the incredibly far distant future, the emissary that arrives there and needs to be clothed in his own body and has a message for the leaders of the city that cannot be understood except by the oldest machines in the city, is basically a time traveler. But he hasn't jumped through time the way old stories had it. He's just been traveling for so long at, subrelativistic speeds that he might as well be a time traveler. He is definitely a time capsule from an earlier era. And he has also a horrifying pronouncement for the people of the city, literally that the whole universe is coming to an end, and that it's going to happen very soon. And that maybe there's something they can do about it, but probably not. And it's also a story of two sisters, and it's a story of an old adventurer, and it's a story of a wasted and weird version of the world. Just terrific. Just absolutely terrific. But although it is terrific, I think it reflects what I'm talking about, which is that standard H.G. Wells style time travel stories, I think, are rarer and rarer these days. Maybe I'll be wrong about that. Maybe when I'm looking through other issues of these periodicals, I'll find a bunch of them. I remember a couple from years ago, but not as rough knowledge of of the quantum world starts to seep into the groundwater. After that, it becomes like when the knowledge of our own solar system started to seep into the groundwater of science fiction. And all of a sudden, you stopped getting short stories set on a tropical Venus. All of a sudden, you stopped getting short stories in which there were mysterious civilizations on Mars. That just stopped happening. That it was a case where reality just stopped those stories from being written because we started to know that those things were impossible. So if you're going to do that, you had to do it in some alternate reality or some different time period or whatever. And I think something similar is happening with time travel. I think people are it's seeping into the groundwater that maybe the standard idea of time travel, where it's just this road and you can bounce back to this period and you'll be the same, but you'll be back in the past, is probably not how reality works. I could be wrong about that. We'll see. I'll keep exploring time travel this week. But for now, before the sun finds me again, I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.